This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of March 24th, 2024. Disclosures, content authenticity statement. 90% of this week's newsletter was generated by me, the human. You will see many outputs of generative AI in the opening section, including an entirely AI-generated Instagram strategy. There's a link at the top of the newsletter to learn why this kind of disclosure is a good idea and might be required for anyone doing business in any capacity within the EU in the near future. What's on my mind this week? A guided tour of the most powerful generative AI model that Google offers. This week, we're going to go on a guided tour of Google's AI Studio and the most powerful generative model that Google has to offer, Gemini 1.5 Pro. Now, before we begin, we should clarify a few things. Google, in its fine tradition of naming things as confusingly as possible, those of you who work in analytics, you know the joy of Google Tag Manager and the Google tag, which has nothing to do with Google Tag Manager, despite the name. Google has the Gemini models themselves, the pieces of software, but also a web interface named Gemini. And there's Gemini Advanced, which is the web interface that you pay for, which talks to the Gemini Ultra model, which is also named Gemini. So thanks, Google. Today, we're going to be looking at the model Gemini 1.5 Pro, not the web interface. To access this, you will actually not even be in Gemini, right? You will be in Google's AI Studio. So this is Google AI Studio right here, which is at aistudio.google.com, which is also confusingly named because this is not Google's other AI Studio in Google Cloud, Google Vertex AI Studio. I don't know what they're doing over there. Don't blame me. I didn't name any of this stuff. This Google AI Studio is for prototyping stuff that you will later deploy elsewhere. You will need a Google account, and to put your stuff into production, if you wanted to take the prompts that you engineer in this test environment and put them into production, meaning connect them to other services, you would need a Google Cloud account with Google billing turned on. But just for casual use, this is a great place to start. For the demo use case, we're going to construct a guide for growing an Instagram account. So let's first familiarize ourselves with the interface, which is, this is actually probably my favorite for working with generative AI so far. It's not as cluttered as the developer portal for OpenAI's stuff, but it's clean enough that a non-technical person could use it easily without getting overwhelmed. So we're going to look at the major features of this. Now, in the newsletter, this is documented out, so you can just follow along if you want there. Part one is here. This is where you go to create new prompts. And there's three different kinds you can make: a chat prompt, a free form prompt, which is kind of like autocomplete. You give it a partial document and it fills in the rest, and a structured prompt, which is for building tables and model priming and all that stuff. Most people are going to use the chat, right? If you're comfortable with Chat GPT, if you're comfortable with Claude or the consumer interface of Gemini, you're going to use chat. But these other ones do exist if you wanted to use them. Next, there's a library here. This is where your saved work is going to show up. So this requires you to connect it to your Google Drive account, and it will actually save the work that you do in Google Drive, which itself is pretty handy. Over on the right-hand side, this is where you choose the model that you want to use. Now, we're going to be using Gemini 1.5 Pro, right? It says mid-size multimodal model that supports up to 1 million tokens. It says Gemini 1.0 Pro is the best model for scaling across a wide range of tasks. So 1.0 training for scaling, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this section here is where you control the safety settings, and there's 4 safety settings. You have harassment, hate speech, sexually explicit content, and dangerous content. And there's basically 3 settings. There is block very few things of harassment, block a medium, or block a lot, right? So this is basically saying, hey, Gemini is going to do filter. In development, in testing and stuff, I turn all the safety features down because I want the model to perform tasks and just do the thing that I tell it to do. In production, don't do this. In production, turn these to whatever the appropriate risk level is for your application. If you are doing this for, say, a chatbot that's going to run on your corporate website, turn the settings, turn the safeties all the way to high. Up here in the title bar, you'll notice you can insert an image, a video, a file, or a folder. Right? This is a big difference compared to the Gemini, the Gemini consumer interface, right? So if you look in the Gemini consumer interface, you can only upload images. Whereas in here in the developer portal, you can upload 4 different document types and connect it to Google Drive, which is pretty cool. And finally, the most important part of this entire thing, this little window right here. This is your token counter, right? This tells you how close to full the short-term memory of the model is. And once it's full, it's going to start forgetting the earliest part of your conversation. Now, this resets per session, right? If I start a new session here, a new prompt, this goes back to 0. This last part, this token window, this context window, is 1 million tokens in Gemini 1.5 Pro. It is difficult to express just how important this is. This is the most important thing of this whole thing. The context window is a model's short-term memory, what it knows during your conversation. When you start a session with any AI tool, this is empty, right? ChatGPT, Claude, Anthropic's other stuff, you name it, any model that you're working with has this short-term memory. When short-term memory fills up, the stuff that gets lost is at the beginning of the conversation. So you can be talking to a model, having a conversation about writing a blog post, and you'll notice, depending on the model you're using, sometimes it just starts to forget. It goes off the rails. It's like, I told you what we're doing, but you've exceeded the short-term memory. If you're used to, for example, the free version of ChatGPT, that forgetting happens really, really fast. A million token context window, a million token short-term memory is about 700,000 words, right? For context, this Anne Handley's book, Everybody Writes, is about 70,000 words, give or take. You can have 10 of those in this AI system before you run out of memory. That's how much memory this thing has. That's how much it can remember in the short term. And that is incredible because it means we can have it work with very large pieces of content, have extended conversations, and remember things we said quite some time ago. We can give it a lot of reference material to think through and still not fill up the memory, right? That is what makes this so special. Now, Anthropic's Claude 3 Opus has the same size memory. Google apparently in their labs has gotten this to 10 million tokens, so which is 10 times bigger. It's not 10 business books, it's 100 business books. That's incredible. Because when you have that much short-term memory, you can put a lot of information into it and get a lot of useful information out of it. And the model can discuss complex topics and come up with solutions and answers and syntheses of enormous amounts of text. So let's put this to action. How does this really benefit us? Earlier today, my martial arts teacher, Mark Davis of the Boston Martial Arts Center, asked me for some help growing our school's Instagram account. Now, I am not an Instagram expert. One glance at my own personal Instagram account makes it pretty clear it's not my specialty. But there are lots of people who share lots of ideas on the topic. And if we could gather up the data that exists publicly, public information, so not anything that is, like a book that somebody wrote, things, but this is just stuff that's out there that they put out there on the internet. If we could gather that data up and distill it and synthesize it and summarize it, could we come up with a highly effective set of strategies and tactics? Yes, we can. And here's how I did it. I did this earlier because this took probably about 20 minutes of time. I found every podcast on the topic of growing your Instagram account in 2024 on YouTube and fed them all to OpenAI's Whisper transcription software, which I run locally on my computer. This costs nothing because it uses your computer to do the processing. So it's not using cloud resources or anything. Your computer gets warm, but it does the thing. Now, I have a folder full of podcast transcripts. Now, I probably could have gone to the podcast websites and just copy and paste the transcripts off their show notes, but it was easier to do this way for me. So what I would do is I would take each transcript and load it into Gemini 1.5 and ask it to summarize the transcript this way. I said, and let's go back to the very top here, you are an accomplished professor and research at MIT, right? You sit on review boards, referee panels, peer review committees. One of your skills is a technique called paper to protocol, in which you digest a paper's findings and translate those findings into protocols, a series of actions individuals can take based on the research. So today you're going to read through a transcript discussing best practices in research around Instagram and growing Instagram accounts. You'll summarize the information you read into a set of protocols. First, you'll make an outline of the key findings, and then you distill them down into protocols. And this whole prompt is in the newsletter, so you can copy and paste this if you wanted to use it yourself. And then I gave it the first transcript, and Gemini, of course, started spitting out like, "Hey, here's this first podcast episode. Finding one binge worthy is key. Use consistent hashtags, 3 different hooks, be socially active on the platform," and so on and so forth, right? And now what I did was this took, like I said, this took quite some time to get all this in here. And transcript after transcript after transcript after transcript. So I'm not going to bore you with reading all these out loud. So what I did after that was I said this: now that you've consumed all these transcripts, categorize all the advice they give and restructure all the advice and protocols into one master outline. And it spits out one really nice master outline. Now, here's the thing. If you know Meta and you know their transparency center, they talk about how their systems work at a high level. Lots of people talk about the Instagram algorithm, but relatively few seem to know how the system overall works. And this is not rocket surgery, right? If you go to go Meta, go to the Meta website, go to the system cards, and then let's go here to those system cards, view those system cards, and let's go into, say, Instagram. How does the Instagram feed work? Meta tells you, here we gather the post, we leverage the signals. Here's how you customize it. Here's the scoring mechanism for how Instagram makes decisions. Right? Meta tells us all this. We don't have to sit here and guess tea leaves, right? So what I did was I took Meta's documentation and added it to the mix and told Gemini, resolve conflicting advice by leaning in favor of what Meta has told us about their own system, and give me a comprehensive revised version of this advice. So let's see. There's the Meta documentation. I went through and had it actually critique some of the posts. And then, great, here we are. Here's accurate advice, inaccurate advice, master outline. This is now with Meta's advice. And so what advice is Gemini giving us? Account setup and optimization. Define your niche, optimize your profile, upgrade to a business profile, and give specific advice on these things, like choosing a high resolution, recognizable image that fits well in the circular crop, craft a concise and impactful bio. You could, if you wanted to, ask it for advice on any of these specific tactics. On content creation, the content mix, utilize a mix of reels, carousel posts, stories, and potentially broadcast channels to maximize reach and engagement. Experiment with different posting frequencies and content formats, content types, the different types: reels, carousels, stories, broadcast channels. Content principles: share worthy, provide value, prioritize quality over quantity. Engagement and growth strategies: understand the algorithm. Like, actually read the documentation. Optimize posts for discovery, engage with your audience proactively, study your competitors, collaborate with influencers, leverage other platforms, analyze your insights and replicate successes, be consistent and patient and stuff. So this is a really good, helpful outline. And particularly if you're giving it to someone who is not an experienced social media marketer, if you're giving it to somebody who's just getting started with their Instagram account, this is a good blueprint. Is it a good blueprint for someone who's been an Instagram professional for 10 years now? No, it's they should be doing all this stuff already. You want to perform this experiment differently. But for my martial arts teacher and his staff, this is a good outline, because this is a checklist. Are you doing these? Now, here is the important part of this experiment. Look down here at the bottom here. This says, in my token window, you have used 76,716 tokens out of 1,048,576. 76,000 tokens exceeds what the consumer version of Gemini can handle by about double. I think it can handle about 32,000 tokens in the web interface, right? In this version here, in regular Gemini, not Gemini Advanced, but regular Gemini, can handle about 32,000 tokens. This is 76,000. That's more than halfway to the paid for ChatGPT. ChatGPT's paid version handles about 128,000. So we're more than halfway there. So if this was being done in ChatGPT paid, we'd be coming up close to the running out of memory. This is 7%. 7% of what Gemini 1.5 can handle. That is an enormous amount of memory. If I wanted to, I could go grab 100 more podcast episodes or YouTube videos about Instagram strategy and add them to the short-term memory. Come up with, the ultimate guide to Instagram or any other topic based on just the published public information that people are putting out there. Again, this is not someone's book. This is not someone's paid content behind a registration wall. This is just stuff on YouTube. This is the power of a huge context window, of a huge short-term memory. We can take the power of the large language models with vast amounts of data that we provide, and we turn that data into useful insights and action steps to be taken. Now, I will say, after all this, I'm still not an Instagram expert, right? The synthesized advice that Gemini helped me assemble is still only advice. I or my teachers still need to do it, to take action on it, to bring it to life. And that's the hard part. Advice is easy, execution's difficult. But in terms of getting the advice in the first place, this makes things much faster. Now let's talk about things that I didn't do in this experiment. Things that if you were going to do this in production, you would want to do. Number one, I didn't spend a lot of time vetting the podcast episodes or the transcripts. I went off popularity. I went in a YouTube search and said, show me which episodes from 2024 on growing your Instagram account got the most attention, got the most views. Popularity does not mean correctness. We know that from various politicians in office. That just because they got a lot of votes doesn't mean their ideas are good. Popularity doesn't mean correctness. So if you're using this strategy for high value or high risk endeavors, you would want to curate the sources better than just, hey, who's popular on YouTube today, right? I did not do that. I didn't run this by a human subject matter expert. As a marketer, the advice looks generally correct, right? From what I know of Instagram marketing. I am not an Instagram marketer. If this was a high stakes engagement, I would want to run it past a real Instagram subject matter expert for their take on it, especially what's missing, especially what's not in there. Because again, the source data is people's conversations in their podcasts. That doesn't mean that's comprehensive. And there's a trick for another time about using a language model to supplement that, but I didn't do that here just because this is an experiment, it's a demo. And finally, I did not evaluate my teacher's actual Instagram profile against this list of best practices because this is a newsletter about using a language model with a very large context window, not Instagram best practices. I will be sending him the list that Gemini generated along with this video. Hi guys. If that's what this was about, we'd spend a lot more time on each of the best practices than we did. And again, to emphasize, we could go in to Gemini and ask it. In fact, let's just do that real quick here. So I'm going to go pull this up here, go back into Gemini. I'm going to say, okay, let's say, what's a good thing here? Bio. Go into more detail here using your overall knowledge of Instagram marketing plus the documentation from Meta and the transcripts we've already read. Expand on this suggestion and provide an outline of action steps to take next. And let's go ahead and paste that text in and say, Gemini, tell me what to do here. You will note too, this is a developer portal. So when it's running, you don't get the little words line by line. You get to wait as it thinks. And it can take sometimes up to 60 seconds to generate a response. So it's not the consumer experience that everyone's used to. This is the developer experience, but you get the whole chunk of things. Okay, so here we have crafting a concise and impactful Instagram bio action steps. Define your goals and target audience. Highlight key aspects of your business. Define your voice and style. What is your brand's personality? Craft your bio. Start with a captivating first line. Use keywords strategically. Highlight your credibility. Include a clear call to action. Keep it concise. Test and refine additional steps using additional storytelling in your bio. Okay, that's pretty good, right? If we were doing this as a production thing, the language model, because of its size and capabilities is perfectly capable of spitting out all of this advice. And you can see here, we only added another 1,000 tokens. So we could have a conversation about every single thing in this outline and develop action plans for every single thing. And you might want to do that. So now I turn this over to you. Take this advice and run with it in your industry, at your company, with your content. Get a comprehensive corpus of top content about any given subject, from publicly available information, and use a language model to consolidate it, to interpret it, and distill it down into something you can take action on. Convert information into action and reap the benefits of taking action on all the advice you've consumed. You've been to conferences, you've been to webinars, you've downloaded ebooks, you've done this, that, and the other thing. If you're still at the end of the day going, I don't know what to do, talk to a language model. Talk to a language model now and say, hey, I've got all this information. What should I do next? Give me an action plan. Help me, give me an outline. Give me some next steps. Here's what I've done so far. What am I missing? What should I do next? We like to think of generative AI as just a tool to spit stuff out, but it is actually one of the best strategic advisors you could ever ask for, because its knowledge is comprehensive. The limits on its memory are much lower than they used to be in terms of, when you run out of memory, it takes longer on these bigger models. And with the data you provide them, they can be incredible partners. So that's how to use, in this case, Gemini 1.5. Of the big models, it's got a 1 million token context window. Claude 3 Opus has the same size window. ChatGPT's current GPT-4 model has a 128,000 token context window, but rumor has it the next version of ChatGPT, whatever it is, 4.5 or 5.0, whatever, will also have a same size, large context window. And these windows will enable us to do these kind of explorations individually, like we just did here, and programmatically as well. All right, what else is happening this week besides the Generative AI for Marketers course I keep flogging? This week, I did a piece on the 2 things you will need to truly succeed in the long term with generative AI. So go check that episode out. Also talked about how to gain practical experience with AI if your company is not using it, where else you can go. And did an episode of our live stream on identifying marketing opportunities with generative AI and the limitations of it. So someone actually had written in the Trust Insights YouTube channel that they didn't get any action steps for using generative AI with something we demoed in the podcast episode. We kind of explained that there weren't any action steps because the problem we were tackling was not a generative AI problem. Let's take a look at jobs this week. We have AI savvy marketing director for screenwriting school at Jacob Kruger Studio, content strategist at GrowGetter, data analyst at Estrid, digital analytics and tag architect at Citadel Opportunities, director of marketing at the EV charging network GreenLane, director of product marketing at Vinafi, marketing and communications director at US Spire, senior Google Ads specialist at Perceptive Digital, social media specialist at SPR Therapeutics, and VP of marketing at Jobot. So lots of exciting stuff happening there. Let's see what else. Upcoming events. I'll be headed to Nashville in about a week for the Lab Products Association, doing a talk on generative AI there, followed by the Society for Marketing and Professional Services in Boston, and then again in Los Angeles in May, the Australian Food and Grocery Council in Melbourne in May, and then the Marketing AI Conference in Cleveland in September. And there's at least one other event that's going to be happening in September, just working on the paperwork for that. And the Marketing Process B2B Forum in Boston in October. I'll be doing 2 things there. I'll be doing a breakout session on prompt engineering, and I'll be doing a workshop with my partner and CEO, Katie Robert. We're going to be doing the data-driven generative AI-powered customer journey lifecycle. So how do you build a data-driven customer journey and use generative AI to enable it? So it could be a lot of fun. So if that's something that we have interest in you, please do come to the event and hang out. We're going to have a great time with that. That is going to do it for this week's newsletter. Thank you, as always, for being here, for tuning in. I appreciate you, and I look forward to your feedback. And I want to hear about how you are using generative AI to synthesize large quantities of knowledge once you get access to some of these large models. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you on the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, And if you want to know when new videos are available, hit the bell button to be notified as soon as new content is live.